All right. Well, I guess we can kick off with the initial part, the intro, who you are, sort of how you got into the hobby. Also you can use this opportunity to plug any socials that you have. Either be Instagram, Patreon, YouTube, anything that you want. Get it out there.
Cool. So I'm Will Hahn, and I'm a miniature painter, primarily display and competition painting. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, U.S. Um, Socials, Sick Willie Miniature Art on Instagram. That's sick with just a K, SIK, and underscores instead of spaces. And then Putty and Paint, Sick Willie on Putty and Paint. And I did recently go through the motions of making a Facebook page, like an artist page. But then once I went through all the effort of making it, I didn't invite anybody to follow it. I've got one follower on Facebook. So if you guys want to check that out, if I get some more followers, I'll probably start using that a lot more. But all right, so yeah, that's socials and everything. And about me. All right, so I started painting miniatures way back in the day as a kid, playing Warhammer, primarily Warhammer Fantasy Battles. I remember, I think it was the fifth edition, Bretonnian and Lizardmen box. That was my first box of Warhammer anything, and I played Lizardmen. Gave my brother the Bretonnians because I didn't want to paint all that heraldry. But so I used to play a lot when I was younger, and then went to a couple of games days here in the U.S. And then that whole girls and gasoline syndrome hits. You get 15, 16, and focus changes. I wasn't spending the weekends hanging out in my house. I wanted to go to parties and go do other fun shit, and it just kind of went by the wayside for a while. And then I think I got back into it for a year or two in my early 20s. Didn't last, but I think it was probably about 4 or 5 years ago now. I guess maybe 2017. I actually got diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease. And it totally wrecked me. It was to the point where I had to get IV antibiotic treatment for 5-6 hours a day. I was hooked up to an IV in my house. I wasn't allowed to be in direct sunlight because some of the antibiotics. So one of the things I used to do before that was I was really into hunting and fishing. That was kind of my thing, a lot of outdoor stuff. And I couldn't do that at all. So sitting here, it irked me just sitting there watching Netflix all day. So I was looking for something else to do, and I thought about Warhammer and looked it up on my phone to see if the US headquarters was still near here, and it wasn't, but I did have a local store. So I stopped in, picked up some GW minis and started painting and fell in love with it all over again. So I did Warhammer, just raising armies, doing a lot of playing and everything for a while when I was real sick. And I think it was around the time of Everchosen when one of the guys at the local store that ran the store said, "Hey, you've always been a really good painter. You should give Everchosen a go." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll give it a shot." And I ended up painting something for Everchosen. It was my first taste of painting for any type of serious competition other than just the local store. And it was really fun. It was really fun to kind of push myself to see how far I could go with painting and make a model the best I could, as opposed to just trying to slam out units and get them on the table. And then I lost the store vote, which I wasn't very happy about at the time because I thought that my model was absolutely better and should have won. But it is what it is. And a bunch of the local guys were like, "Hey, you should go to the Nova Open because this is an awesome model. Put it in the Capital Palette there. I'm sure you'll do really well." And I went to Nova that fall, and I did do very well with that. And then another piece that I did at the end of the summer, I got a gold in best in category for the diorama, which moves you from journeyman up to masters next year automatically. So I'm like, well, shit. Now I'm going to have to go against all these crazy painters next year. I better get good. But being exposed to all of that at Nova Like I got to see stuff in person from like Eric Swinson and Matt DiPietro and a lot of the other like really big American competition painters. Stuff by Sam Lenz and Vince Venturella, meeting those guys, and I was able to take classes with Matt and Eric, and it just bit me, man. I just got hooked into it hard, and from then on, I just was trying to paint the next best thing, make each model better than the last, and COVID hit and a lot of painting, you know.
Yeah.
Changing diapers, watching kids, and painting minis. So
COVID was such a big one. Like in well, for me in Twitch, and I think for a lot of the guys that are here in Twitch as well. Like everyone kind of either picked up a paintbrush or started taking the hobby to the next level. Like I know SC kind of got back in over COVID. That's whenever he
mm-hmm.
started streaming as well. So it's been a real ride during that time.
Yeah,
Mag wants
for
to
for
know
as go ahead. Yeah.
if you had to sell your soul to the gods of painting red fabric. It's just
Is that a reference to Scarlet?
yeah,
Yeah, that was actually that was such a fun mini to do. So I didn't sell my soul to the gods, but I did invest in myself for classes and coaching. So that first Nova that I went to, like people talk about how great convention classes are, and they are. They're fantastic. Like the exposure to the amount of knowledge that I got at that convention was just, it was more than I had ever learned on YouTube or anything before. Um, and I from then on I started to do private coaching as well as any other online classes that I could. So after Nova, I think I wanted to sign up with Matt, but I couldn't. So I signed up with um, Aaron Lovejoy, who's an amazing painter and now a very good friend of mine. They share a Patreon, and it was the perfect next step for me to take. So I since then I've done a lot of basically mentoring from being mentored by other great artists and trying to learn from as many people as I could, learn different viewpoints, different techniques, different everything. And I started with Aaron, and then I was coached by, and then I signed up with Richard Gray. I was really lucky, and he happened to have a slot open up, and I saw it like the same day that a slot opened up. I'm like, boom, I'm taking that. So I still I still talk to Rich a lot. And then I was on with Sergio Calvo for a while. And then after Sergio, I went to Alfonso, to Banshee, which it, the way that I signed up and the way each of those guys kind of approach models, I was lucky in that they kind of built off of each other. And as I got better and better and better, each of these guys could give me more and more. So it was cool. That's how I think really got to where I was, is through coaching and learning and the constant desire to. So it's, you have to expose yourself to the knowledge and the information, but on the other hand, like, you're not going to get anywhere if you're not practicing it. So I still paint every single day. And you constantly have to push to get better and apply all of that information that you're learning, because if you're not applying it, then it's not really going to stick. One of my favorite quotes that Rich ever told me was, if you never paint like you're trying to win a golden demon, then you'll never win a golden demon. So if you don't paint like you're trying to win whatever competition or show or whatever you're doing, then you're not going to get to that level. Like, you'll try and you'll probably fail more than a few times, but you just got to keep trying, and then you'll crack it.
So do you think there's a lot of value in the online classes? Because I know a few people in the chat have been considering going to in-person workshops and stuff, and it's a bit harder for myself to make it to those. And I've been looking at online stuff as well.
It's a fantastic substitute for in person. I mean, the best thing that you could ever get would be like an in-person one-on-one workshop, and that's going to be pretty expensive. Not going to lie. Um, but the online's great, and it also depends on the type of learner you are. If you're the type of person that can take criticisms and information and turn around and work on it on your own, then that'll be fine. But if you're the type of person that needs to actually, if you're more tactile, more of a tactile learner, then I would definitely advise doing as many in-person workshops as you could. And I'm hoping to do some in-person workshops here kind of soon. Actually, this past weekend, Eric Swinson, who's another friend, he just did his first 2-day workshop at a place down in Virginia Beach, which is, I'm sorry, in Virginia, which is a couple hours away from me. And I went along with the workshop, and it was a blast. The in-person workshops are so fun, and it was just a bunch of big group of guys trying to, paint and learn together and enjoy, and it was real fun. A
It's
lot of
actually
painting and a lot of drinking.
oh, a lot of drinking. Oh, is this actually a good question from Thor here?
Mhm.
He was wondering if you've ever hit a wall with your painting, and if so, how did you get through it?
All the time. I hit a wall. I hit walls all the time. I hit walls on every project, um, and it's important to be really excited about, or really excited, really invested in the project that you're going to put your all in. Because if you're not, when you hit those walls, they're really hard to overcome. And if I find the secret, yeah, I'll let you guys know. I mean, other than just persevering and just making yourself sit down and do it. Like if you're more excited about it, you're more likely to be able to overcome that. So I am actually notorious among some of my painting buddies for abandoning projects. Like if I didn't abandon so many projects, I would get so much more shit done. But yeah, so I mean, I'm kind of guilty with that too. So it just comes down to, like, I don't really have a trick for it other than picking the project at the beginning that you are very excited for.
Cool.
I wonder if I can show you this. My computer's kind of hooked up, but like my shelf of minis, I don't know if you guys can really see it like on the stream, but I have this entire bottom shelf is like abandoned projects. These are all like abandoned projects down here. And this top shelf is the stuff that's actually finished. So it's almost a ratio of like, I don't know, 3-to-1 abandoned to finished,
There you go.
probably.
See, I really try and like finish everything that I set out to do. But there are times where I'm absolutely going
Well,
through that. I don't want to do this.
maybe you can give me some tips. Maybe you can give me some tips.
Just
Because like if you're not beholden to anybody, if it's not like, for a box art or like for a commission or something like that, it's like I don't really have to finish it. So
mm,
if I'm not having fun doing this, then why am I doing it? That's kind of my mentality.
yeah.
If you're
Crispy
on the hook, then you
Minis.
have to finish it. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's right. Crispy Minis wants to know what was your big or your biggest eureka moment when painting or with painting. Like, was there a moment where everything just really clicked? Was it during the classes or whenever you were just sitting there one day or having a
Um,
shower thought?
so I think advancement in painting it'll be almost like a series of eureka moments. Um, and I would say like if I had like one really big one would be finally gaining control of an airbrush to the point that I can do detail work and really things like post shading, and understanding that like you can spray airbrush over all this work that you've already done without ruining it, and it's the opposite. You're actually enhancing it. And that's something that's become sort of a staple in my process. It's just so much faster. Um, but there are always, whenever you're trying new techniques. I mean, everything, even thinking back to like trying to learn how to glaze, or doing that like slow glazing build up method. Like I struggled with it for so long, and eventually it does kind of click because you learn the right thing to do by fucking up and making mistakes, because then it's process of elimination. Then you know all the shit that you don't do, and eventually you'll hit that right thing and it works, and you're like, okay, put that in the bank, and then build off it.
Mike has a question that kind of actually probably transitions nicely into, I guess, the next segments where we can have a look at some of your, well, some of the projects that I quite like and some of the ones that you quite like. Um, so let's see if I can pull up the right screen here. So Mag wants to know if, like, do you generally sketch out a model, or what your, like, of your first idea, composition, and colors, and work through those, or is there a certain process that you follow? And I guess this is a great model to look at, because I know you kind of went a bit back and forth with some parts of this as well.
Mhm.
Um, and sort of how did you, I guess, how did you go from the initial idea to this, and I guess the changes that you went through along the way?
Okay, so I do both. Um, Sometimes I'll sit down and I just want to paint, and I don't go in with a plan, and then I'll just start playing with colors and values and throwing stuff on there. I do normally start with a some sort of directional light prime. I don't say zenithal prime because it's zenithal's from the top. It could be from the side, from below. It could be wherever. Um, and then I'll just start slapping paint on it and see where it goes. Other times, there are other projects that I do start with a very clear vision in my head on the direction that I want to go. Um, Two projects that I had a very clear vision on were Oni and Scarlet. Like I knew exactly the mood, the ambiance, like everything that I really kind of wanted to do. Now at the same time, what do they say? It's like no plan ever survives contact with the enemy or whatnot. So it's like a lot of times plans don't always survive contact with the brush. So it is really important to be adaptable when you start putting something onto the model and you realize that it doesn't work. Um, I think that self troubleshooting, the ability to, analyze your own work and see issues is probably the most important skill that you can have if improvement is your goal. Because once you can do that and you can self analyze, then you need much less outside input to grow. Um, so for the wolf, um, there was some obvious inspiration from Sergio's Crystal Brush Space Wolf. Um, I just liked the color palette, but at the same time, I wanted I wanted to make it my own. And then I'm thinking about this project. I'm trying to think about like all the back and forth things that I did. Some of the changes that I made were based on Alfonso's suggestion, because when I was doing this is one of the first projects that I actually completed, kind of apprenticing under him. And one of my favorite things about this one is that the face was mostly painted. The face was probably like 80% painted, and Alfonso was like, "I don't like the face. It looks stupid. You need to add a beard." It's like, wait, what? He's like, yeah, yeah, just take some green stuff and sculpt a beard over it. It's like, oh, all right. So I just went for it and took green stuff and sculpted. I filled in the hair and sculpted the mustache and filled out the beard, to make it wider, um, over a mostly painted model, and then just spliced it in. Um, and it added so much to the model. And of course, I mean, whenever you do, like, what I find with non-metallics is that I am constantly adjusting the reflections and the highlights and everything to make sure it flows with the composition, but also it reads correctly based on the primary viewing angle. So that's something that I do a lot of adjusting of, and that is one of the benefits to kind of sketching all of your colors and your highlights and everything out on a model, as opposed to taking a different section, getting it almost to completion, and then moving on to another section. Because what'll happen is you'll finally get to that end model where everything's painted, but your sections won't necessarily line up. They won't necessarily flow together. You have a higher tendency to run into problems doing that. And that's something that I used to do. I used to do a lot of models like that, where I'd finish a whole section, then move on to another section, then finish that, and then finish that. And then now I've moved to much more of an organic process. So I hope that wasn't too rambly, but
There's actually a good question that I missed from Celery that probably
Mhm.
also applies to this model. Um, I know because there's a difference in the lighting here as well. Do you consider the environment first whenever you're painting a miniature and then build around that, or do you sort of have an idea
Yes.
for yeah?
Yeah.
Because I know
Uh,
there's
the biggest reason that that's important um, is because the environment is very much tied with your ambiance, and ambiance should dictate your color selection. Um, whether in your cold or a warm environment, that all translates into kind of creating that atmosphere. And if you just start plugging colors in, I mean, you can adjust it afterward. You can adjust anything. You can repaint any part that you want. But I think it's better to not make more work more work for yourself.
cool. I think could actually probably look at the Oni model for that as well because there's a lot of obviously the complementary colors that you went for here with the I guess the base and also in the model kind of apply a
Mhm.
lot to that. If you want to talk a wee bit about this one,
That fucking bass, man. I've avoided doing jungle and forest bases since then because of this, because of how much freaking work that was. So what was the question?
it was sort of again going back to the ambience and the environment that you set and
Mhm.
sort of how it drove the decisions around this project too.
So with this one, it wasn't my color selection wasn't influenced as much by the ambience on this specific project. Um, that's something that I really started pushing a little bit later. Um, actually, Ronin would be a good example on when I kind of started to do that. This it works either way because it's a warmer environment, or a little bit not really warmer, but really sort of more neutral. With a more neutral environment, I could, I should say ambience, because it's not a neutral environment. The environment is very, very green. Um, maybe I should elaborate on my thought process behind this. So, you talked about complementary colors, and one of the biggest things with this model, the reason that it works with the photo, um, uh, God, I'm sorry, I'm like having a brain fart. The reason that it works is for Oni is that big red skin blotch in the composition as a whole. The composition is very green, and red and green complement each other. Your eye is immediately drawn to that red skin in this massive field of green. And then once you get in and you start to look at it, you can see smaller areas of focus and leading lines, which kind of direct the viewer's attention to certain areas. Um, and it's actually really interesting. So if I take this mini off the base, and I put it on a black background or a white background, anything neutral, the focus is totally off. It doesn't work. It only works because of the background itself. What ends up happening is the armor actually overpowers the red on the skin, and then it kind of creates havoc with the focus. So that's one of the things that I was trying to do with this model is kind of create this sort of layers of focus to basically bring the viewer's attention in and be able to direct the view where I wanted them to be. If that makes sense. I hope that's not too abstract.
Uh,
For Ronin,
oh yeah, I'll switch over to
um,
Ronin now.
yeah, for Ronin, it's a very cold environment. It's a night environment, and because of that, all of the color selection is sort of influenced by that idea. So the anything that was, if I recall, doing gold on it, it's kind of a colder gold or brass where I did. It doesn't have a lot of saturation in the hues. And I did that to reflect the environment and the reds as well. Like if you look at the reds, they're not nearly as saturated as something like for Scarlet. You know, the whole thing fits the atmosphere of this cold, snowy forest, and basically all of my color selections have some of this bluish gray tint to it, and that was the driving thought process behind this. So you can see it's very cohesive in that environment.
Oh, so this is probably another interesting question. So whenever
Mhm.
you paint your models, especially with some of your busts as well, how do you decide what to do with the back of your models once you've already established your primary light source and I guess your focal point of the model? How do you keep the I guess the 360 interesting, or what is it that drives your decisions around that?
Well, you notice that I do a lot of backdrops. That's
Yep.
that's so I don't have to paint the back of the model.
Uh, there you go, boys.
No, but
Top.
really, so or you don't have to pay as much attention to it. But it does. There's a couple ways that you can do that if you want to do a 360-degree view. I mean, with any sort of display model, it's very important to have your specific viewpoints. You're going to have your main viewpoint that the front half of it is painted specifically for that view. And as you turn the model, you can also paint the model to have other specific views. One way to do it for the front and back is to basically have your main view for the front with a kind of a linear composition, and then on the back, do the same thing. Because when they're looking at it from the back, they can't see the front, right? So you can have those two separate sort of sources, even if it's kind of the same lighting. The other option is, I don't know if you'll be able to really see it. This is something that I've just kind of been playing with. This is the model I started to do in Eric Swinson's class, and I've got a very warm light in the front, okay, and then in the back, the tones are very purple and desaturated and whatnot, showing that this is the ambient in the back, and the front is the warm light source. So that's another kind of method that you can do. But specifically, if you're painting non-metallics and anything that is very viewpoint dependent, um, that's where the viewpoint becomes even more important. It's a different mentality than painting for tabletop.
So there's another good question I think would apply to I think the cult model that you did. Um, I guess well this is but I could apply to anything as well. But is there anything specific in this project that you would change if you had to paint it again, or in some of the other projects that we've already talked about?
Um, yeah, a lot more refinement. For Oni, I would make the main light warmer. I would add more warmth to it. Nothing really harsh. Just more subtle to kind of add that extra oomph and give it more of a steamy jungle feel rather than colder forest feel. Um, Cult, there's a lot that I would change. There's a lot of areas on that model that need a lot of refinement. And I would spend a lot more time working on the non-metallics as well. Would have liked to add some freehand, clean up the face a little bit. There's actually a mistake on the hair on the side where it flips out, where there was an area that I forgot to glaze down. I hit a highlight and then I forgot to resaturate it with yellow, so it's just this like weird white spot that I'm not sure anybody else has noticed, but I notice it every time I look at it.
Boys, go look
Um,
for it, find it.
yeah, like zoom in on like the side of his face. I think it was the one view that you just had before you switched it. Well, again, this stream is a little bit laggy. That was a fun model though to work on all the cast shadows. That's something that I hadn't really experimented with before, and it was kind of tough because the way his hand is, like if you look at the base, it's got the shadow of the hand on the base. That's not something that you can kind of take reference photos for. Like a lot of guys with cast shadows, they'll like use like a flashlight and to mimic the source and then take reference photos to see where the shadows would fall based on your light source. And I couldn't do that with the hand. So the hand on the base, because it gets wider, that angle of light is smaller and extending out. um Getting the distortion for the hand, it was all just eyeballing it and kind of trial and error. um when I was finishing this model, I think I started this before I cut my finger off, and then it sat on the shelf for a while, which was kind of a good thing because Clay Project was a little bit behind on the release for this. And then all of a sudden it was like, like 2-3 weeks out, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna release the model. I'm like, oh shit, I gotta finish it. So I was like racing to kind of finish this model right before the release, and I think I finished it like the day of. But I mean, a lot of it would be on any of my models, would just introducing more tonal varieties or adding other little details or any of that stuff that kind of comes toward the end. I do have a bad habit of rushing to finish models for deadlines. That's saying if it wasn't for a deadline, I wouldn't get anything done.
I know what you mean with that one. Do you want to talk about? Well, I was gonna say you could fill people in on. There might be some people here who are not aware of your um small accident and kind of the hiccup that it caused to your painting. You could give them the less gory version though, but
What's that? Oh, okay. So it was, I think it was maybe like was it a month out for MPO or like a couple weeks out, and I was trying to get in like a last minute entry for single for something smaller scale, and I went out to cut a plinth one afternoon or one evening, um, and the router bit. I was cutting a groove in the bottom of the plinth. The router bit caught and it kicked the plinth, and my hand just went straight into some whirling blades of death. Um, and for anyone who's not familiar, a router is a woodworking tool, not your internet router. It's a woodworking tool that's kind of like if a saw and a drill fucking had a baby. It has this sort of big bit with blades on the end that kind of rips the wood out. And I was using a 1/2 inch straight bit that would basically make a cut kind of like this in the wood. And it went, it nailed my finger, my index finger on my painting hand. And it was what they call a near amputation. It basically was only hanging on by a little bit of skin on my right side. So it severed both the tendons. It obliterated the bone inside, cut the nerves. It was a pretty gnarly injury, and of course, one of the first things that I was thinking about, like, shit, am I ever going to be able to paint again? And I was really lucky that we have an amazing hand surgery center uh, very close by to me. I think it's like one of the best in the world. I think it's like the best in the US, and it's like 40 minutes away. So that was just stroke of luck that it healed up well. But since then I've had to change the way I paint a lot. I think it was Karg was the first mini that I finished since the accident. I actually completed it like 6 weeks after I cut it off. I started painting 2 weeks after the accident with gauze all over my hands, trying to hold the brush with like just like barely hold these two fingers. I had no fingernail on my thumb. Um, and I remember the first session, I went for about maybe 45 minutes and I must have dropped the brush 50 times. I had paint all over my pants. I could barely grip anything. And then I started to eventually, with the next couple weeks, kind of adapt a new sort of brush grip that got me through the summer. And now that it's healed up much more, I can actually hold the brush a little bit more normal, but it's really hurt my brush control. So the fine detail control that I felt like I had before, I don't feel like I'm back up to speed on it. Um, and the other weird thing is an airbrush. So I can't bend my finger all the way down. And one of the things that's nice, so if you notice, like a normal finger can kind of bend like this finger, I don't have it at all. I've got this weird little T-Rex hand. It's actually a half inch shorter than it was before because it was a half inch router bit. So holding the airbrush, I actually have to do this like this weird little like T-Rex grip called the T-Rex grip, and I kind of have to hold it like this and use my middle finger now as opposed to the actual finger because it doesn't bend. Um, but it's shit happens, life happens, shit gets thrown in your way, and you just improvise and adapt and figure it out.
But since then, you've gone on to produce Scarlet, which was the winner of the People's Choice for Ed Banger, and I'm pretty sure it
Mm.
placed in the Masters category as well.
Yeah,
Did it? Yeah.
it got third in open.
I also had to make this safe for Twitch, so there's no nipples anymore.
That's okay.
You know,
Um,
sorry guys. Do you want to tell us a bit about the thought process behind this and sort of, well, I think everyone's probably curious as to how you achieved this like saturation and vibrancy in the reds, because I know I asked about it and it was pretty much what I wanted to do with the
Interesting.
Ulrich, but could not figure out how.
So, um, I don't know where kind of the idea sort of popped in my head. Like sometimes I have all these ideas for minis and I don't really necessarily know where they're coming from. I think that creating just a big inspiration bank. Like I do try to look at a lot of like fantasy art on Instagram. I probably look at as many like digital artists or two-dimensional painters or stuff as I do mini painters, and then of course I'm watching all kinds of crap on Netflix. Um, just to get sort of ideas, color choices, ambiances. So it is another cold ambience. I know that's something that I do a lot. Um, but I wanted to use that vibrant red to create a layer of focus, much like I sort of did with Oni, but it not being the main focal point. Um, so this is like explaining kind of how I how this thing sort of came about is might be difficult for me to get all the words out in my current state of mind because I seem to be fumbling over my words a lot. But I just thought that the model, it was a hard model to kind of attack because this has been done so many times by so many really great artists. And I did want to have something different. Something that I noticed that no one had really done yet was this really bold, saturated red. And I knew that would really pop against this cooler blue ambience. Like I know a lot of people have talked about it and said like, oh, it's basically black, white, and red. It's really not. Um, there are a lot of very subtle color variations in there. Um, they err on that side, or they kind of lean toward that very desaturated spectrum. But there's green, ivory, there's blues, there's actually purples in the red. But it's the degree of the saturation that, or the low level of saturation, that when I add it in there, it does kind of create this cold atmosphere, but with more, I don't know, oomph to it is, I don't know, kind of know the right word, a little bit more impact. But making it, I wanted to take kind of this sort of like demonic vampire lady, right? And I thought it would be cool to create kind of another contrast with the sort of gothic cathedral background. Um, so you kind of have this sort of demonic or satanic or whatever you want to call it lady versus architecture that is typically found like in a Catholic church. And that was another reasoning behind the type of base. And then constructing it, I made it so if you look at the lines, the way that they shape up towards versus the size of the figure and the lines on the figure, it actually creates a lot of compositional lines and helps to create focus and something that's called a leading line. So a leading line in any kind of artwork or anything is something that's it's not always very apparent, but it's something that's used to basically allow the viewer's eyes to easily move on. So the even though I have this big, white area at the top, the architecture of the arch, it kind of comes down. So even if a viewer's eye was looking up there, those lines help to pull it down towards the miniature. And then her horns go up like this around the arch, so your eye can track down to that vibrant red if your eyes are not already pulled there, which for the most part it is. But I think kind of compounding these techniques in any miniature is what is going to take it to the absolute max level. Like, people talk about contrast, and when they talk about contrast, they're talking about value contrast, but it's literally a drop in. It's the big one, but it's a drop in the bucket. It's the tip of the iceberg. You have value contrast, color contrast, texture contrast, size contrast, materials. There's so many types of contrast you can create, and when you compound those in a specific piece, you can create something even more dynamic than you would, or much more dynamic than you would have otherwise. So now that is that's over, let's talk about this red. So one of the things with red, a lot of times people have a very hard time painting red, and that's because the sort of the properties of it, and I guess this does depend a little bit on the sheen of the material that you're going for. But your true saturated red is your top. It's your ceiling. And most people want to take other colors. They'll use red or yellow, or I'm sorry, like orange or yellow, or maybe pink or a flesh tone, and push these highlights up further than they should really be going or relative to the material that you're trying to represent. So I originally started doing this was kind of like a satin sort of thing, and it doesn't have a lot of specular highlights. So that's a specular highlight is where the light in the environment is actually reflecting off to your eye. That top highlight needed to be a pure saturated red. But one of the things I was worried about, even a great red pigment like a nice bold naphthol red, or like a cadmium red or something, like, it just didn't have the oomph that I was really looking for. So one day when I was talking to, it was during another session with Alfonso, and we were kind of just brainstorming together and kind of going back off of each other. I had the idea to use fluorescence instead to kind of compound that contrast and get even more pop than I could out of just a standard red pigment. And I took what I already had, which is already was a pretty saturated red. It was using a naphthol red. I don't remember if it was Chimera's the red or the Scale Artist Primary Red or some of my Liquitex. I really can't recall because they're all similar pigments. But over top of that, I just took my airbrush straight to the work, and I started adding in more value to bring it up light. Then I used some AK fluorescent magenta, airbrushed back over the red, I'm sorry, back over the white to gain a nice poppy, bright fluorescent undercoat. But magenta is a little bit colder color, and I did that for the reason to kind of still fit. I didn't want to go too overly warm with this, even though the red's really warm. And then after that, red is a warm color. If I had had anything under it like yellow or orange, it would have been too much. So I chose the magenta, and then I used some De La Rowney fluorescent red ink, and then I put that back over, and I airbrushed that back over to ridiculously bright color. Airbrush that over the magenta that I'd already done. So that saturated red is actually layers of fluorescence over white. And one of the reasons that you want to undercoat these really bright colors with white or something that's very light in value is because acrylic paint in its nature is very translucent. So when we're looking at it, the light in the like in the room or whatever environment we're viewing the model in is basically coming through those top layers of paint and then bouncing towards our eye. So when you use something that is, you want to use something that's very saturated and slightly translucent, like an ink or whatever. That is what's going to allow you to really gain that saturation. If you like, for instance, I'm sure plenty of people have done this where they've taken like yellow paint and just like painted over black, and like you layer it like 100 times and it still doesn't look yellow. And that's because of this translucent property of acrylic paint and specifically different types of pigments, yellow being a very translucent pigment. You're never going to be able to gain that without the proper saturation, without putting white underneath of it first. Um, so that's another, buttload of information. And then for the shadows, I glazed in, standard regular acrylics. I put some purples into the mix down to some very dark blue. I think it was a scale 75 green gray. It's one of my favorite colors. They're a scale artist.
Very cool. I'm a big fan of this one. Like the reds are just so nice, so nice. Um,
it's it's one of my favorite models. I think it's probably my best work to date. I don't know if I can pick out another one that I think is better in any way or is more impactful or that I really like as much. So
I guess this would lead back to one of the earlier questions as well. Is there anything about this that you might want to change, or are you content with this piece?
um, I'm gonna leave it. If there's anything else that I think that I would want to add would be a little bit of light bounce, a little bit more light bounce coming from the fabric onto the flesh.
Mhm.
I did a little bit coming off the shoulders to the bottom of the horns, but this was another one that I ran out of time on. Go figure. Deadline for Headbanger was looming, and I think this one I actually submitted into the competition with the most time I've ever had to spare submitting a model into a competition. And I think this was probably like 2 hours before the deadline. Like up until this one, like I think every competition online that I had ever um, entered in was like 10 minutes before, 5 or 10 minutes. Like MPO was last minute. Like Brush Beast was last minute. You know, all of them. And looks like I'm looking at the chat right now. Minis by Mag mentioned luminosity, and that's exactly the right. Sorry, my brain is not working very well, but yeah, luminosity is exactly what you're looking for. The term.
Frog Jim Jeff is wondering what your next project is, or is that currently top secret? Are we allowed this inside information?
No, not really. I have a bunch of ideas. So actually, this whole month of September into early October it was kind of crazy for me with work and just had a lot of stuff going on. I think I was talking to you about scheduling and everything, and I had like two weddings, and I had that weekend workshop with Eric, and it was and with like I said, work was going crazy, and there was just so much going on that I painted like zero. Um, but I have had plenty of ideas, and one of the things that I'm supposed to be doing is that I think so. It's Eric Swinson, Steve Garcia, and I are doing a friendly paint off on a model from Freedom 3D. He is a Chinese digital sculptor, and he does some really cool stuff. I think his handle is at Freedom 3D LZN or underscore LZN. Um, and I'm supposed to be painting this very soon. But I was kind of, after not painting and being so busy, I was kind of in this painting rut. And that's one of the reasons I'm so happy I went down to hang out with Eric and start painting a model, because I think that Morlock from Chimera that I just showed you is just kind of, gave me that little bump to kind of get back in the groove. So this model, he's so cool. Love this thing.
Oh yeah, I remember you showing me
So
the sketches, the ideas for this one.
yeah. I did a little bit of concept sketches. I got a little drawing pad that I can actually use Photoshop now. Um, what I'll be able to do to hopefully get give you guys some feedback, as long as my brain continues to kind of function today. But I think that one's in the barrel. I've been kind of racking my brain on trying to figure out a bust to do, because I'm planning on going to LVO, but I want to bring another bust for that competition. The Space Wolf, the issue with him is that some of the fluorescence on the backpack have faded, so it just doesn't have the impact and doesn't look as nice in hand as it did before. Um, it's one thing about fluorescent pigments is that they're not very light fast. Um, so that's making me want to do another bust. I think, yeah, but that orc should be one of the next ones that's coming up.
Uh, Salary's asking a
Oh,
question about. Did you just read it?
no, I was gonna say, Frog. You're exactly right. Eric's version is awesome. And of course, we were all joking that Eric would be finished his before Steve and I even started, and that was absolutely the case. And Minnie said, "Yeah, he's like the Warcraft 3 Blade Master." That's exactly what Eric had mentioned to me.
So Salary wants to know if I guess emphasis on lighting is one of the most important aspects of any art form. Or well, I said sorry. Emphasis on lighting is one of the most important aspects to study when approaching any art form. Do you think that is applicable to miniature painting, or do you think that there's something
No,
higher up the chain?
I agree. No, I agree, 100%. Absolutely, color and light is the most important aspect. I think back in the day when everything was sort of, when miniature painting was dominated by either the historicals or the Games Workshop and Golden Demon sort of style of it, before people started bringing into like actual light sourcing and stuff like that. Everything was this sort of edge highlighted heavy metal ambient sort of style, and the emphasis was much more technical, on like a technical side. And I do think that that's absolutely changing. um, I think in order to get a really dynamic and compelling piece, that it's important to study things like color and light, ambiance, how emotion is put into a piece. That's what's going to separate something from separate works that are just really good to the stuff that's truly great. I mean, we can look at a mini painted perfectly, like absolutely perfect to a technical degree, but if you don't have that ambiance or emotion or whatever, then it's just another colored mini. Like, I think there's and that's just that's my personal opinion. It's not that I don't appreciate that, because I do. There are a lot of there's a ton of painters out there that are way better than me from a technical standpoint. And I do think that's something that I do want to continue to push. But the color and light and color theory and all of that, I think, is the most important thing to know if you want to create dynamic pieces.
So you mentioned about all these things coming into miniature painting now and moving away from like the historical old Games Workshop style. Where do you think it's going to go in like the next few to 5 years? Like, do you have, I guess, any inclination as to the evolution of miniature painting as you see it now?
I have no idea. That's such a hard question because I think even since like the beginning of COVID, um, the landscape has changed dramatically, and to be able to, peg where we're going to be in 5 years, I have no idea. But I mean, as long as people keep pushing things and trying, trying new things, I think that we are going to see a lot of changes in progression. And that's one of the things that I have sort of noticed is that I think that more people, it seems like more people are kind of getting into a, not just a competition painting thing, but more as miniature painting as an art form. And that's something that I would like to see, more, more art pieces really than just painted miniatures. Um, like I've been playing Games Workshop games since a kid. Like there's this big portion of my heart that the gaming miniatures and all of that is in. But that's not really my focus, and I don't find it as compelling or enjoyable as um, seeing all these new things that are being done. Different ways to render the miniatures, different ways to use miniatures in environments. Like you see a lot of people doing using backdrops and stuff for busts now, which I think is really cool. Um, I'd love to play with something like that, or just there's so many different directions that we can go with art, and I think that the more this an art focal mentality kind of takes hold in miniature painting, we're going to start to see even more cool shit coming out. So, what those things are going to be, I don't know, but I definitely think that with more people getting into it, with more people pushing the envelope, with more great painters around, we're just going to see, you know, see it kind of go, just kind of spider out, go in all kinds of different directions.
Cool. And then Frog wants to know, well, I guess who are your favorite painters? You've either from like a technical aspect or from the like emotion and variety that they bring to the art form.
Dude, that's so hard because I could sit here and name 100 different painters on who I absolutely love for different reasons. Um, Specific, different. I mean, of course, like the big ones, like in the top five, like Mark Masklins, Arnel Lazaro, Lan, Kirill. Obviously, Kirill. Kirill's freaking amazing. He's an alien. He's literally he is like still light years ahead of like everybody else that's painting minis. I love Dave Caldwell's smooth style that he does with stippling. It's crazy. One of my, one of my personal favorites that I really enjoy seeing everything he does is Ethami Alonso. Um,
Oh, I
I
thought you
just
were gonna
I
say me
love
there.
yeah. Everything he does, and one of the things that I like, he experiments like that bust he did, the Mads Mikkelsen bust that was sculpted by the Thorbjorn Barone. The way he had like basically created the 3-dimensional brushstrokes, to kind of create this brushstrokey bust. It was just it's so cool. I always love seeing his work. I mean, Alfonso is one of my absolute favorite painters. I love his style, love his mentality. I have learned so much from him. And that's actually another thing. Like, if you guys are trying to learn stuff, and you may be not be able to shell out for private coaching or anything, you should absolutely sign up for Miniature Art Academy. Um, those videos are absolutely fantastic. Moving on to small scale. I mean, I think my favorite small scales are painters. Hands down, my favorite small scale painter is Richard Gray. Um, I think it's just I love his style. I love his ambiance. I love how he does everything. Um, I love Andy Wardle. I love Andy Wardle's work. Um, there's just so many. I could sit here all day talking about my artists. Natalia Oryx. I love her style. The I almost have to like organize this into my brain by like country because there's just so many different painters that I love. So many great Italian painters too, like Rusto Fabrizio. I love his style as well. I love his color usage. Um, I mean, yeah.
The list goes
U.S.
on. Like,
Eric, Matt Pietro, Steve Garcia. I love how technical he is for an American painter. I mean, there's just dude, there's so many. Like I could sit here and literally rattle a list of like hundreds. Oh, if you guys know Sani and Dai, uh, he's a French painter, goes by Nebuusan online. Um, I love his impressionistic style to miniatures and his color usage. He's one of a kind. And if you guys like Warhammer stuff or Games Workshop stuff, he's got some super cool converted armies that he's done. And he's also so fast, dude. That guy will sit down and he's like, "Hey guys, I'm painting a mini today," and then like 4 hours later, he sends us like a completed picture, and it's like full on done. It's like, man, what the fuck? Like, how the hell did you get that done already? It's crazy. It takes me like 2 months to finish a model.
it is a skill. I had a quick. Well, I kind of wanted to jump
Mhm.
back to one of the other pieces that you did because I know it's the dude from the Hobbit. You know, the orc guy, Crispy Mini will know exactly the
Azog.
dude. Yes.
Mhm.
So as far as I know from this dude didn't actually have like the sculpted scarring in the face, and you
No,
actually
no.
painted
Well,
this
all
in,
right. So
kind of.
I think that miniature has like he's got like one scar that goes like over the eye, and then like a little bit right here. But everything else to make him look like Azog, that's all paint.
Do you want to tell us a wee bit on how you did this because it is a bit mind blowing that this is not sculpted.
So that's I'm gonna butcher the name, or the pronunciation. Trompe l'oeil effect. Um, Trompe l'oeil. I don't know. That's a French word, but it basically means to trick the eye. Um, so it's you're creating depth, the illusion of depth on the model with your colors and values. Okay, so it's the same concept of I'm sure a lot of you guys have painted like in any of your Games Workshop models when you're painting like nicks on the armor, and then you do like you have like your base color, and then you do like a black line and then like a light line underneath of it, and it looks like there's a scratch there. It's the same exact principle, just more complex. And you do it at a little bit bigger scale. So because it's at a bigger scale, I've got more room to add details in there. So inside of it, I'm using, inside that scratch, I'm using flesh tones and um, creating the jagged edges with the skin. It's just, yeah, just a little bit of doodling. It's just like painting scratches on the armor, but flesh colored. And it's another point where it's important to keep in mind your directional light source, where your light's coming from. Because if you don't have that, then it's going to look like paint because it needs to be consistent.
And then there's, I guess, one other one that you had. So this one, uh, well, I kind of wanted to talk a bit about the flesh tones in this as well. If you have any sort of advice on painting skin and how to get, I guess, the color variation and life into it, because I know it's one thing. It's one thing I struggle with. So I assume other people
Mhm.
would be interested.
Skin is it can be one of the hardest things to paint. Um, there are so many different tonalities, ethnicities, everything that you could they could be in there, and you could have skin isn't just a set thing of colors. I know a lot of people will go, especially if you start out from a Games Workshop perspective, and you have your basic skin tones. It's like kind of like dark brown, or and then like this sort of medium orangey flesh tone, and up to a you know a lighter basic flesh tone. They're like, okay, well, we'll use these three colors and make skin. It's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. You can have every color in the spectrum in skin. That's why if you ever watch somebody make skin from scratch, they use all of the colors, all three primary colors, because depending on what's going on in there, it can appear different. Like you ever watch, like if you take, like watch a movie, right? Like any of these sci-fi or fantasy, like or historical drama type things, and like you look at like a warrior or something sitting in like the moonlight, right? And you've got the nice orange glow on the one side of the face. If you look at the shadow side, a lot of times those tones in the skin will look grayish blue, or you'll have olive green tones in there. And it just kind of, that goes back to what I was saying before about your overall ambience dictates the color palettes that you're going to use. Um, there's Skin is such a complex subject that it's kind of hard for me to break it down into kind of something simple. Um, the simplest thing I can say is use reference photos. Use reference photos. Reference photos are your friends in everything that you paint. Um, that's the big, like take some time, sit on Google Images and just like look at different portrait pictures, and look at different portrait pictures in all types of different lighting. Um, and that should be able to give you an idea of the the type of tones that can show up in skin. Like, and don't just look at the whole photo like of somebody's face by itself. Like, zoom in and then do some color swatching. Do some color swatching in Photoshop or something, and pick out the areas and the weird areas in the shadows or weird areas in tones. Um, and that can help give you an idea as well. Another thing that's helpful is to think about anatomy in itself. So where on the body is like the skin really thin, like something over top, because our skin is for the most part, it's translucent. It's kind of a translucent organ. So what we're seeing is, a lot of the stuff that's underneath. And of course, that changes if you're, say, painting an orc that has like green pigment in its skin, or painting a darker ethnicity that has more melanin in their skin. Um, that can change, but so areas that are a little bit more fleshy, or has more blood vessels in it, you're going to see more of that pinkish red tint. Areas that have less of that, like over a bone, like over your elbow, or on the forehead, that can appear a little bit more yellow, or possibly even greenish, depending on the light. Where hair would grow in, on your 5 o'clock shadow or something, you can use grayish or blue tones. Sometimes I actually use kind of a pure phthalo green mixed with a little bit of black into my regular skin tone mixes to sort of create that 5 o'clock shadow. Um, yeah, don't shy away from purples. Purples are great, especially if you glaze purples out and you make them really thin. You can get some nice, because purple, depending if it's a warm purple, it'll have a lot of red in it. That works really well for shadowed areas. So you're kind of adding that blue from a cold shadow, plus the red for like, say, a fleshy area, or like underneath your armpit. Um, yeah. So study anatomy, study light, and references.
And you mentioned about
That's
pulling
how you can
stuff
get good at skin.
into Photoshop and creating swatches. Do you find that Photoshop has now become like a core part of your development process and how you create your ideas and play around with things?
Um, yeah, to a degree. Um, it's incredibly useful, and I actually probably don't use it as much as I should. But if I'm planning, a lot of times if I'm planning a project, what I will do is like, find some reference pictures and then just start taking swatches, just to kind of get an idea of how the colors play together. Because another thing that does make a really big difference on your piece in a whole as a whole is color relationships. Color relationships are so important. You can have um, so I think there's like an example out there, and there's this picture, right? It's a bunch of strawberries with a green tint over the whole thing. And the strawberries still appear red, but if you swatch it, there is no red in the entire picture. And it has to do with how we perceive colors in relation to everything that's around it. Um, and that is something that I have been playing with and working on, and it is a one of those brain melting subjects. So I think that's where a lot of people kind of fail, is or run into snags, is like, you'll look at an image, and if you don't swatch it, you're like, oh well, that cheek is pink. So if you match that color on the palette to what you perceive that color to be, you put that on the miniature and it's going to be off. It's not going to look like it. If that area is, say, it looks like it's pink, but it's surrounded a little bit more by cold colors, it might not be pink at all. It could be just like a gray tone, like a barely a warm gray tone, but in the surrounding area, it'll appear pink. Um, and that is advanced color theory shit. And it's kind of tough to learn. So that's one of those things that when you try it and you start working on it, don't get frustrated too early, because it's not an easy thing. I still
Cool.
struggle with it all the time. But if you swatch on Photoshop, it gets you, a few steps closer to that.
And then talking
It's
about
all a big
Photoshop,
balancing act.
that nicely
Hmm.
transitions us into, I guess, the feedback portion.
Okay.
Um, unless anyone has any other questions that they would like to throw at Will before we jump into, I guess, demolishing our self-esteem.
I hope I haven't been like too rambly on this.
No, it's all been great. Really, like, I have a lot of things to go think about after this, and probably for like the next week.
So one of the guys that was down at the down at Swenson's class, um, he's Mike. He actually runs the Listening to Paint Dry podcast, which is, if you guys like listening to interviews with various artists, that's it's a fun one to listen to. But he was asking me for some advice, and I was talking to him, and he likened me to a fire hose with information. I thought that was kind of funny. But I know that can be the case, that sometimes when I get talking, it'll all come out. Next time, maybe I need to have a couple drinks before the stream,
Oh yeah, I find that a big help
and I'll
whenever I
flow
started.
out. Yeah, it's oh my god, it's already 4 o'clock here. We started at 2:30, so it's a little early for me to start drinking.
It's never too early.
Okay, so are we? Oh, thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Thor. Celery. All right, so we're gonna move in to.
Yep, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, let's see. All right, so this is Aaron's, right?
Yeah, this is from ASC Miniatures, or Aaron. Yeah.
Cool. Is Aaron here? Sweet. Awesome. All right. I like it. I like where it's going. I like this. I like this model a lot. I actually have this model too. The one thing I wanted to ask though is, where is your light coming from? Wait, I can't hear anybody.
Oh yeah. As far as I know, the light is coming from like top right, just over the, I guess, the left shoulder,
Like,
so the left side of his face.
is it left or right? Okay. So that's the reason that I'm asking is because to me it seems like I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Okay, I'm gosh, this is kind of um with the
Yeah, so he
light
says
being
front right as it's
God, my
viewed, so the left of the model.
okay. All right, that makes a little bit more. I mean, that's good. That means it's better because I was the problem is right here. These sort of values. So this is a little bit contradictory to me with what you've got going on over here on these skin areas. That's a terrible color for you to actually be able to see. So these highlights show me that light direction, but I feel like this volume is a little bit, or the ones over here, this is a little bit wrong. Um, so let's, what I would do, sorry, this, like my, right now my computer is really um, acting really slow and kind of wonky here. I want to, let me see, this thing's like not responding. My brushes. Is this working? There we go. So I'd say I'd want to bring this, some of these highlights up a little bit. No, come on. Let's see here. All right. Man, this is, I think my computer is having some serious slowdown. It's not doing the things. So kind of just darkening down here, adding a little bit more. Let's get some more of this. Love for this to be a little bit more yellow too. And then kind of accentuate this volume up here on, because if the light source is coming from, undo, it's coming from this direction, it should kind of come and like, I don't know if you can see the cursor, but sort of come in and bounce off this direction. Um, so I think that you would be better served to sort of move the highlights over here. And I know it has this weird sort of ridge on this area, like all around here, which is really weird. And I'm not sure why they chose to sculpt it like that. Um, Personally, I haven't even really thought about what to do with that on my own yet. I might just cover it up. Um, by the way, if there's any questions or anybody saying anything, James, like if you can let me know because I can't see the screen right now.
Yeah, no problem. Essie's just commented on the ridge being a bit of a thing as well. He's unsure like how to tackle that as well.
Yeah, it's really sort of weird. I mean, I think I'm either going to do mine like totally in shadow probably, or probably sculpt over it. And
That would be an
then,
option.
yeah, where's the,
Jesse,
Is
do you have
oh, it's
any
not showing up.
targeted questions that you want to throw Will's way about this piece?
Another thing I think would be good is to sort of shape this miniature. I mean, don't necessarily follow the colors that I'm doing because they're not. I'm not like the best with this yet. I'm still sort of learning this Photoshop. Um, but when I say shape, sort of pull the focus direction, like the hand. You want the focus to be here. That's where you want everything to point to. So you can use the highlights on the here to sort of create leading lines upward, and then this highlight here to move up that way. You can also use like this here would be in shadow, so don't do that one, but you could use sort of like a rim light coming up here. This will serve as another leading line going to the face. I'm gonna have to go back a while to get rid of this
And
red.
then I guess he wants to also focus in on, I guess, the direction that he's going with the skin and the value contrast that he's currently creating within it, if it's the
Good,
right
because that's
direction.
the next thing. That's the next thing I want to get to. Okay, so I like the tones here. Okay,
Oh,
that
because he
to me
just
is
said that
much more
he's not.
realistic.
Sorry, I was going to
Go
say
ahead.
he's not said that he's not. He said that he's not touched the arms too much, and the chest and face are still kind of flat. But I'm curious to see what you think about
Exactly.
the direction with the color of the arms as well.
Okay. This one I can tell you haven't done yet. Okay, that's just your base coating here. I like the tones here seem more realistic to me than they do on the rest of it. I think one of the biggest issues that you have um, is that these you have kind of a dark tone that goes straight up to this really pale tone, and I don't think that you have very you don't have a lot of room to go up in value. Um, so I'm gonna try to like slowly add in some more of this, and I'm just using just a gradient uh, of the arm that you had already done. Just a little bit of that. This is that tone here. So shape these a little bit more here. And I'm not quite sure how you want to do this base. If it's a frontal light, if it's more to the front, then these chest areas will be a little bit more illuminated. If it's more to the side, then they're going to be less, and you'll need to shape the area like down here where I'm painting right now. But either way, I think you can just knock this back a little bit. And the other thing I'm going to mention is this. It looks like you're trying to do like light bounce from the cloak onto the peck, and it's way too saturated. It's not. It's not going to look like that. You need what I would probably do is take sort of your shadow flesh tone, and then mix in a little bit of this sort of like the green from the cloak, and that's going to create one of these off broken tones that will look really weird like when it's sitting on your palette, but when you place it next to the skin, it'll give you a more convincing effect. Like this doesn't look like light bounce to me at all. That's something that I think that you should either get rid of the light bounce totally because it's really strong, or you just need to tone it down. Um, we can just move this a little bit. I want to get. Let's see how this works. And then we were talking about skin tones before. The neck's also another one of those areas that you can get some of the flesh tones. Right now, I'm just using a purple because you've already got it. in the other areas. This area down here, you're going to want. Let's go a little bit more blue there. Nope. I go back. Hmm, too saturated. Right, this is not working the way I expected to. Sorry, I'm still a little bit newer at Photoshop. We'll just do dodge a burn it a little bit. So define these some of these elements. Wrong button.
The old chat are loving this at the minute. I think it's super helpful.
Oh, really? Good, good,
Yeah.
good, good, good. I'm glad, guys. So this is all about, kind of shaping this model a little bit, and I would darken this other side. I'm trying to be really light with this right now. I don't want to go too far. But this further, will push in that lighting direction. And then keep in mind the face, like it, for the most part, as a general shape, the face is kind of like a big ball on top with a cylinder here, or you can do it as flat planes, as almost like a box. So you have a plane on this side, and then a plane in the front, and then a plane here, and then you can further break it down into different shapes. So planes on the face that typically catch light are going to be this forehead here, the nose or the brow, definitely this cheek area, the higher cheek area as a plane is going to catch light. And that's going to be the one on both sides. And if it's a 3/4 light, they're definitely going to be illuminated. But as the face curves down this direction, then you're going to start to lose light. You've done a good job on the chin as well. So even here, we can just kind of push in a little bit more contrast and then shape this a little bit here. And then
I feel like I really need to learn how to use Photoshop now.
I'm just, I'm a noob, dude. I'm a noob. Do this plane here, brighten these up. Maybe just hit the knuckles here. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I'd kind of do is, or the things that I had mentioned. Let's try to find a nice. I like this mid-tone. More here. Midtones are really important in skin. If you're painting a little bit darker, so just the pale skin tone that you had kind of had with him, just to me, it doesn't really fit the character. Just seems really, really pale. I mean, I see a Rodin. I picture him, kind of trekking out and on quest and being outdoors and fighting in wars and shit. So that pale tone doesn't really, you know, fit with me. Unless you wanted to have him in a snowy atmosphere, then I would get that, but I would probably add a little bit more of these reds and purples into the tones. Um, the skin tones I'm adding now have more orange to it. It'll show a little bit more of a what's it called? bronzed tone, like he's been out in the sun and working on killing people and shit. And then you can get a little. Let's see if we can get some of this in here. Then for a warm night, you can use like sort of this yellow. And that'll contrast nicely with the purple. Sorry, it's not super. I'm just trying to illustrate the idea, not really perfect. But the yellow will help, kind of make it pop a little bit more so than this white. You're adding, more luminosity to the skin, and it's both the sort of color theory aspect of it as well as creating ambiance.
I was gonna say SE's gonna have his mind blown here. He's gonna be away working on this straight after.
Awesome. I'm glad it was helpful. Okay. Where'd my coffee go? I need coffee. That's how I get through the day. Is that good, Aaron? Can we is it okay if I move on to some more? Okay, cool. Because I think there was a fair bit.
There were a couple.
Fair bit.
There was also a late addition from Space Cow. If you have time for that one, you can obviously like skip over
Okay.
mine without any issue.
Yeah, that would actually might be good, James, and then I can do one privately.
Yeah, we can just chat about that another time.
Yeah. All right.
And Macy, thank
So
you
what
for the
happened,
follow.
guys, was earlier. What's that?
Oh, we got a
Oh,
follow in the middle, so I was just saying cheers.
nice.
Thanks,
There you go.
thanks to Macy.
All right. So yeah, guys, I had all these like downloaded into Photoshop pre-stream, and then like my computer and Photoshop crashed. So, all right, whoever did this, I think was this Chris P.
Yeah,
If
this
I
is
remember
crispy
correctly.
minis.
Okay, so from a technical aspect, like I'm actually really impressed by this. Like I think this is really, really done well. I think your color composition is it's great for this style of mini. Is this going to be a competition piece, or is this kind of a gaming piece, or what?
I believe he's heading, or he was looking to get it up to competition standard. I think he was possibly taking it to um, Salou in November, or else to Iron Skull in February.
Okay. If you were gonna take this to like Golden Demon or something like that, like there's really not much that I would change, because this is the type of style that they just eat up. Um, the gold armor, I love that. It looks like you have a good handle on finishes, because it's not a shiny gold, it's a kind of a dull beaten gold, and I think you've handled the normal light and shadow and adding in the metallics, the metallic sheen very, very well on this. Um, Here, I just want to kind of color swatch this and see where you're at here. Okay, so you could go up even just a little bit brighter on some of these, I think. Where's my brush? My normal. Oh, definitely different size picture. Just to really kind of push the light up around these top areas. And once again, I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to go to mention focus, just like on Aaron's. Like focus is so important. One thing that about this mini is it's rendered very, very well all the way around, and that would be from a competition standpoint. Me, and this is my personal view, not everybody else's, because there are people that disagree with this. Is that there's a little bit of a lack of focus. Like everything's painted very, very well, but it doesn't really draw my eye anywhere. And you have a lot of really bright colors around here that the face sort of gets lost. So I would say we kind of want to pull the focus like, upward to this area. One thing that I think that would probably be helpful is putting in a little bit stronger sort of specular highlight onto this this black, uh, which could help frame the face a little bit better.
You've hit the nail on the head with what Chris was looking. He wanted to know how to create, I guess, more focal points on the model. So bang on. And he also says he really thanks you for doing this.
No, of course, man. This is fun, and this is good practice because I would like to take on some students or something in the future, and I need to get a lot better at this. Um, Trying to think out what you kind of want to do with this red. Do you want to go for a saturated red, or do you want more red? Because personally, I like the choice of that kind of maroonish red. Um, with everything else, because I think if you did go with a saturated red, that it would start to clash. Like there'd be too many strong colors on here. With that being said, I think that a more saturated maroon color might be better. Let's give this a try for these highlights as opposed to something that's so pale. See how this works. Just kind of pencil this. Yeah, actually, I like that more. So this isn't like a super strong red. I mean, it is a stronger red, but it's not like crazy. And the thing that's nice about this will give you the illusion of more of like a soft fabric, not like a satin fabric. And I think that that fits with the mini and the materials that you've got on here a little bit better. But keep that sort of more saturated red kind of up towards this upper chest area. And then what I'm going to do is let's just create a little bit of focus by darkening down some areas. So I'm just going to just darken this mini a little bit. God, sorry guys, my pad's like not responding. It's jumping around like crazy right now. It's like not where I'm pushing the brush.
I will say the addition of the brighter red actually makes a significant difference already.
Mm-hmm. And that's when I was talking about painting red before. That's like one of those big mistakes that like people like to, or people commonly make. Um, that you're highlighting it with this sort of saturated color, and you lose the strength in the red. So here, Chris, what I'm doing is I'm just darkening these other planes that are facing away from the light, and it's giving you a a little bit more impact, and then it's also going to draw the focus upward more. And then just add in a little bit of almost like edge highlights on the boots. It doesn't have to be. This would be so much easier if my pen was responding the way it's supposed to. Not doing what I'm telling it to. And if you wanted to, you could add a little bit of boot shine, but that's up to you. Doesn't have to be. Come on. I'm gonna have to close some shit in Photoshop. But so can you guys kind of see how that sort of draws the focus up a little bit more towards the top of the model?
I definitely can. I think Chris also really likes the change in the red. He recently picked up the Chimera set, so he says he might bust out the
Yeah.
red.
Uh, do you have the base red?
I think he got the core set.
The base set.
Yeah, so I got
Did
the
you
base
get
set.
the? Did you happen to get the Cartacci set?
He got the non-metallic set as an extra, but I don't think he's got the Hitachi set.
You didn't get the Cartacci. Okay, so I was actually thinking. I think a great would actually be the Cartacci red in the other one. But yeah, you can still use the red as well. Um, I think a scale artist one would work too if you have that, or if you like pro acryl, the Pyrol red. You can use that. The nice thing about red is because it is more of a translucent pigment. In order to get that full saturation, you do have to, paint something light underneath. If you were to layer up the Pyrol red, so it wouldn't be as powerful as painting over a white coat, then I think that would give you a little bit darker red. That would work well. And another thing, that our perception of a color isn't just. I mean, it's the midtones and highlights and the dispersion of where we put those colors and values. So if you I'm trying to think about the words to explain this. Kind of the percentage of a color or value that we paint over the surface as a whole will dictate our perception to how light or dark that. So you can make it look like a little bit darker red, maybe adding a little bit more purples or something in the lower midtones. This is actually looks on the computer screen looks a little bit different than on my pad. So I hope this is displaying correctly. All right, Chris, anything else you want me to kind of address? Because otherwise, I think the direction you're moving in is great. Um, yeah, I mean, keep it up, man. It's great work.
Chris is grateful for the advice. I'll check it out and I'll give it a go. So I don't think he has any more questions. I think the
Cool.
next two models were from Mag, but if we just do the samurai one, that'll be that'll be handy.
This is
Just
that's one of my doodles for the other one. I'm closing certain things out because my computer is like struggling.
oh yeah, we
Okay, so
have
which one did you want to do?
we can do well. We can do both of these. So this one, the genie, is by Celery Paints, and then
Okay,
Mags is the samurai one, and then I
okay,
think Sassy had some specific questions about the direction she was going for the big
okay.
pieces.
All right.
So Celery had entered this into a competition recently, and he had placed second. I don't know if he has um any specific points that he wants to target. If he's still in the chat, give us a shout, let us
Mhm.
know. Or
Yeah, if you're still there, then I'm looking at the chat.
he is still here. Celery, are there certain things that you want Will to take a look at with this piece?
Where's my little here? While he's answering, I'm gonna I gotta go to the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back.
So Celery was specifically looking to know about his well, he said he focused a lot on the cloth texture with this project. And the light source is just off from the middle. So I guess any real tips or direction on how to improve the overall piece?
Okay. Okay, no worries. All right. So one of the things that I just wanted to say, like, if I say I don't like something to any of you guys, like, please don't take it personally, and remember that this is my opinion. Other people could have different opinions. It doesn't mean they're not valid or more valid or less valid, whatever. Um, one of the things that I really don't like about this is the composition. It feels very off balance to me, and I understand that I can see that you're trying to create a sense of movement, which you've achieved creating the sense of movement, but I don't like how it is. This is very in a way, this is very sort of symmetrical. Like this is your base here, and you have the mini in one half. Okay, when you put something in, oh shit, when you put something in a half of the composition, um, it's going to make it feel very off balance. Like this, whether or not that was the goal. It's just something that's not really pleasing to the eye. What I would have done or suggested is if this was your base, to create it instead of in halves, do it in say one. You want to do it in thirds. That's a terrible line. I'm not wearing my little glove thing. So if the base was basically, just trying to use some other colors to,
Yeah, so Celery said he was trying to create the impression of movement by showing that he's riding like the wave of sand.
you absolutely have, like, you, that's something that you've done, and you, but with that being the case, it still feels off balance. Creating a sense of movement and making something balanced and pleasing to the eye, pleasing for the viewer to look at, that's two different things. So you've done the right thing by placing him in like sort of this frontal area. That's a terrible. Why is it down there? You, by placing him in this frontal area, like he's going from this direction. Um, you've achieved that here. But with that being said, when it was just on this half, again, it makes it feel very very weighted, and like I said, off balance, not very pleasing to look at. When you extend, if you were to extend this base a little bit further over, that puts him on this 1/3 line, the focal plane of the miniature, which is his you know his face, this kind of area of the chest, and this what's it called, this his thigh that's extended upward right here. um it just, if just can you see that, how it's more visually pleasing and it feels more balanced, and you still have the sense of movement by adding a little bit more to the base on this side?
We wait the
Like,
reply.
does that make sense? We're waiting for the reply.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
um
So I
okay,
assume it will make sense to him as well.
okay. So that's one of the biggest things that I don't really like as much. Okay, why is this not working? All these brushes are on. What the hell? Oh,
Yeah.
there we go.
So
That's why.
Celery said that whenever it's like this, it feels like you don't have to fight to see where he should be. So it makes more sense.
That's it. Yeah, yeah. Um, the other thing is this. So this, what's it called? Big stone here. Um, it's very, so it's very linear, like up and down, and he is too, which it's, I mean, it's fine, but it's not optimal. Like, so this rock, see how you have a nice angle? Where's my brush? Like, oh, my flow's at like 60%. That's why. Okay, so see how you have a nice angle here? He is straight up and down, right? And you've got a nice angle here, which is helping you for movement. This thing being straight up and down is very parallel to the miniature itself. And again, it's just one of those things that's amazing. I think that it would be, if you were to have sort of a rock, like maybe the main rock coming off this side here instead, um, you go towards them, or I would say just experiment with different angles. This is just, it's very square, it's very static, it doesn't look natural. Like, I can't really figure out what it was. Maybe it was a ruin. If it was a ruin, then some some cuts or crumbles in here to kind of create some more lines. Um, that's just my suggestion on it. So yeah, the base, less crazy about. Let me just erase all this. Where's my size? So I can actually work on a little bit on the miniature itself. And then on the miniature itself, like I think it's pretty good. I like it. This face looks a bit odd. Okay. So if this is going to be your tone, I hope I'm on the right brush. God damn it. If this is like kind of your light highlight tone, this nose is should be a little bit more of like a plane here, because you had on this darker area, you had like this big highlight on the side that was almost linear and not on like the nostril area. That's kind of, I don't know if you guys can see this on the screen. Like I'm like expect you guys to see my cursor. So you had highlighted this area and then, but this was very dark, which doesn't make sense because that's an upward facing plane, which would catch light. I would say add a little bit more. This is obviously a warm setting, so less ivory, a little bit more like ice yellow or something like that. See if I can lightly. Same thing here on this area. See how desaturated this is? Can you see where my color picker is? I don't know if you can.
Yeah, we can see
That's
the color
like
picker.
it's like a weird buff color. Um, and that it doesn't match with these other tones like right here. Like that's a great color. Like you nailed it there, but it doesn't match the rest of the model. And this is on a shoulder where there's a little bit less focus. So if if it was coming from the side, then I like how this chest is sort of in shadow. But if it's more of a frontal light, then some of these areas would pick up a little bit more. So let me just darken this down just a little.
So he had said that
Now I am
the light was just offset from the middle.
okay. Would like just a little bit more warmth in here, and then if the light itself is warm, that highlight can kind of that should show up in some of these other areas as well. I wish I had this on a wheel instead. So let's just make a little bit more desaturated purple or desaturated yellow to show up a little bit on the purple. So when you start adding and you start changing these specular highlights, which are shine, which can reflect the light source itself, that's where we're going to get some these tonal variations, and then it can become a little bit more convincing, especially in this green. Undo that color. So the green's going to pick up the yellow more than something like purple will. The purple will kind of desaturate, and on the pure areas of reflection, then you're going to pick up a little bit of yellow in there. But that's another one of those situations where it's you're kind of want to use a gray that's got a little bit of a yellow tendency, and it'll look more yellow against the purple. See how this color works. Okay, and I take it you were trying to do a little bit of like a shine fabric here. If that's the case, I said even if this is going to be shiny, this highlight, this spectral highlight, is like ultra thin. Um, wrong button. Sorry, I keep pressing the wrong buttons. And this leg is a whole big plane. It's a whole big cylinder. We can add some more of this yellow here.
So yeah, he was going for like a silk material shine on that
Mhm.
section.
Silk is a very hard material to paint. Okay. Um, but you've done well. Like I could see obviously that this fabric is supposed to be shiny. Um, one of the things that does happen with silk and stuff like that is your saturation. So this is a very like for the purple, it's really desaturated. So I'd probably go kind of like a nice, rich, warm, royal purple. Kind of blending mode do I want to do here? Just take it past a bit. Let's see how this works. Can add a little bit of these saturation into the midtones.
So Celery did mention that he was struggling with the purples. He tends to add too much white when creating the highlights.
Okay, then take a pure purple and glaze back over it. Okay. What kind of purples are you using? Because to be honest, a lot of miniature paint purples on the market right now that most people use are, in my opinion, pretty inferior.
What purples do you use?
Mhm. Do I use?
Yeah, if you think
Um,
the mini ones are inferior.
for purple, the Chimera purple is fantastic. PV23, it's a specific violet pigment that creates this like gorgeous, rich royal purple tone when you glaze it or you thin it out over light colors or even add it into other mixes. Um, the problem is specifically like something like Games Workshop colors, or I mean, even some of the AK purples that I picked up, like they have a lot of white and other stuff in it. It's not a good pure pigment purple. Um, and that kind of sets you at a disadvantage from the. So something with paint is you can always decrease saturation. Decreasing saturation in any kind of paint is really easy. Increasing saturation in paint is not. It's hard up to impossible. Um, so starting with something that's very saturated is pretty important in my opinion. So PV23 is probably one of my favorite saturated purples. I also like the scale artist purples. I know not everybody likes them. Another option would be to go towards inks. Daily Rowney Purple Lake is a fantastic warm purple. Um, Liquitex makes that PV23 violet in an ink as well. And you can use that just like any other mini painting ink or whatever that you guys have. If you're into using heavy bodies, I like the Liquitex heavy bodies. You all those heavy bodies and stuff, you can mix them with inks. You can mix them with your normal mini paints. You can do whatever you want with it to kind of increase the fluidity, so they're a little bit easier to work with. But starting with something that is more saturated is important. So I'm going to try to shape this as a little bit big.
So he did
And
mention
once
that
again, hmm,
he did
go ahead.
mention that he put some blue and purple inks into the shadows. They used the Vallejo game ink range for that one.
Cool, that works. I can. The thing is, even if you may have done that, then you lost it. So when that happens, you just glaze back over with that very saturated color, but thin it down. If you have an airbrush, a good way to do it is thin it down in the airbrush and do a filter as opposed to necessarily like a glaze. Um, and then the other thing is just like some of the other guys that was, pushing some of these darks, pushing some of this focus. And I'm going to go and take this whole miniature here at the bottom, and I'm going to darken some of these areas that are less important. And we're going to create focus because this is basically a big cylinder here. So you have your sort of linear highlight running in this direction. And thing about desert is all oftentimes you have pretty hard shadows here. So you can push this pretty hard.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. Celery, do you have any other questions before we bounce on to the next piece? Or are you content?
So, and without doing the base, you can see you're already a little bit more dynamic here. And on top of this, like it depends on if you wanted, if you know where the light source is, this center area, how far you want to bring it up. But if that's in light, then you can add some of these harder spectral highlights, which is basically where the skin is going to be shining. And the white surrounded by this, oh, I'm using the wrong layer and wrong brush again.
Celery said that he doesn't have any more questions. It's been very valuable, and thank you.
Yeah, cool. Very, very welcome. Yeah, and then so these spectral highlights kind of come in, where on these any of these points where the skin would be sort of shining, the shoulder would get a fair bit of light. Cool, cool. All
Cool,
right.
cool. I think
Yep.
Mag had the samurai with the floral pattern. I think he's still in chat. So Mag, do you have any specific questions that you want to throw at Will for this?
Bag. Is this Lee by any chance? Or no? Do I know you? Have we chatted before?
I believe you have spoke.
Is this Lee Winnett? If I recall correctly.
Or don't tell me he's gone AFK just when it's like the most important part of his life here.
It's okay. I'm going to I'll just keep it going, and he can watch it on YouTube if you missed it.
It is
Lee,
Lee.
it is
Yeah.
Lee. What's up, Lee? How's it going, man? Okay, actually, I think I remember you maybe showing me this miniature before when you were working on this freehand pattern, and I love the pattern. I think it's really cool, and you've done well with keeping the saturation in the yellows. Um, what scale is this mini? Is this thing like really small and like not cast very well? Frog. I mean, over to the UK, that'd be a long. So Lee, what scale is this? Is this thing really small? Metal. Oh, I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you if it was metal. By the Kirby sword. This little. It looks like you got it at like Party City for a costume party. All right. So the biggest thing here is we are going to go back to focus again. I take it you're still working on this chess piece area because that looks like for the most part just kind of a base coat. But with this pattern, and I know you've already, what's it called? Done all this freehand work. So the best way to kind of darken this down. Why is this like not? really kind of showing up. How's this gonna? I'm trying to darken down the areas that you need to have darkened, but my Photoshop isn't really kind of cooperating at the moment. Um, so you have this big beautiful pattern, but it's because it's the same over the entire model. Like you can't really. It's hard to see the. There we go. The shape of the model itself. So the easiest way to do it, especially because you've already done all this work, is to kind of take your airbrush and use an airbrush filter to kind of knock back some of this, uh, kind of this big whole mess of yellow with this beautiful pattern on it, because you can't see the shape of the mini underneath of it. That's the thing with freehand, is because you've created a lot of noise basically. And when you create noise or texture or whatever, it can hide the shape underneath, especially on something that's small like this, like 32 millimeter miniature or 42, 44, 44. Okay, come on, don't quit on me now, brush. Um,
Yeah, so Mag is saying that he went freehand too soon, and he thinks he should focus more on the shadows.
I mean, not necessarily, because what you can do is, so you have your pattern in, done all of you've done the majority of the legwork, right? Do you have an airbrush? I hope, because if you have an airbrush, this is going to be much easier to to work with. Um, Flip it upside down, shoot it from your shadow side. Use um, yeah, use a darker shadow color. I mean, if you want to go cool, you could use something like, I mean, I normally use something like Payne's Gray. I don't know if you quite want to do that off the bat. Maybe use a kind of a nice saturated brown color, like a yellow orangey brown first, to reintroduce some of the saturation around like these folds, and then do it again afterward with a Payne's Gray, where the light detail and the color is going to start to drop off. Um, but with an airbrush, you can make this a lot quicker than just glazing it in with a regular traditional brush, and it'll be less spotty. You will probably have to come back in and tune up this freehand after you do that, but that's kind of to be expected, and that's just kind of part of the process. And if you do have an airbrush, you can also sort of shape this base a little bit. You can actually spray right over this vegetation and try to get your airbrush in like underneath here, like underneath these plants and stuff. So you can kind of create this focus. Did you go TMM on this, or is this NMM? I think with the lag, uh, it's taking a little bit for those responses to come.
Yeah, and then I think Mag's on borrowed time. Usually doesn't get to watch streams this late, you know.
Yeah. Time is it? So
It's
oh god, you're almost 10 o'clock.
almost 10. Yeah, I usually streamed at about 11, half 11 anyway. But Mag has to spend evenings with the missus. He did True Metallic for this.
Okay. I do not like true metallic metals. I am not very good at it, so I can't offer too much advice on it. It's just not my jam. Um, this is still too saturated. This. I would like to see a little bit more variation, kind of in these skin tones, and you can just thin out some red, some sort of like magenta or something. Just like really knock this down. Let's see how this works. just to get a little bit more life. Like right now, it kind of looks like he has makeup on. I know. Actually, let's take your skin tone. Let's see what you have about here. Gonna reintroduce a little bit of the saturation here. Hands too. On the knuckles, and the hands, that's an area you can add some red. And then, yeah, there's like sort of knuckle areas you can actually go on the specular highlights. You can do a little bit more yellow. Um, it looks kind of awkward. I don't know if that's just like demonstrating at all what I want it to do.
Mike, do you have any more questions on this that you want to throw at Will?
I'm gonna try to bring a little bit of blue under here. You could actually bring in a little bit of this blue-gray color for more of a 5 o'clock shadow if you wanted to. The one thing I do want to say though is even if you're going TMM here, this back edge of the sword looks like you're, God, I don't have my little like glove thing on, so my hand doesn't slide across the screen the way that it should. But do a little sort of like edge highlighter rim light on the blade. Because right now it kind of just gets a little bit lost. On smaller scale minis, it becomes a little bit more important. The smaller the details, kind of the higher contrast that you really sort of need. It's less of a balancing act and more like forcing it in there so you can actually see the detail when you pick it up. And then I would also, even though it is TMM, take some, if this whole blade is sort of like silver, use like either some ink or just some thinned out like regular paint, and then start to, you know, knock down certain areas a little bit that you would want to shine less, just like you were doing NMM. It's really the same as, I think painting good TMM is very, very similar to painting NMM. But the difference is that you're not working in all the directions. You're kind of putting those bright metallics down and then adding in your shadows where you don't want the shine to be.
Yeah, so Mike said that's been really helpful. Thank you. And like, I think his
Of
takeaway is
course.
that readability is key here on this piece.
Readability is everything in every piece. One of the things that I kind of like to do is show my models to my wife when I'm working on something and not tell her what I'm going for, what lighting material, whatever, and just say, hey, what do you think? I don't give her any background on it. Because if I show it to somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, doesn't know what they're looking at, and they're like, wait, what is this supposed to be? Or this looks kind of weird or whatever, then I know I have a serious problem. Non-mini painters can be great people for feedback, because if someone who's not a mini painter can instantly recognize what you're trying to do, that means you're on the right track. So if I show it to her and say like, "Hey, what do you think?" She's like, "Oh my gosh, this leather like looks like real leather," or like this his skin tone looks fantastic. Then I know that I'm nailing it and I can move on. But when she's like, "Wait, what is this?" Then I need to go back to the drawing board. Okay, so we goodly. Sorry, I had a little bit of trouble with the Photoshop to try to shaping that, it didn't kind of work as the way I'd want it to. But I
So
think we do have to move on because it's getting late for you guys
yeah,
over
I
there.
think I think Lee is pretty happy with that one. So the next one we have is from
Cool.
Sassy. She kind of has a more general question than I guess feedback
Hmm.
on like specific things. So at the
Is
minute
this the?
it's the red. Oh, that's another one by Mag. So we're skipping over. It's this piece, the
We're
red
skipping
and
over this one.
yeah, that was another one
Okay.
from
One thing
Mag.
I this is actually I do think this one's really I'd love to because maybe Mag can watch this later or whatever. I like the direction this is going in a lot. Um, One of the biggest things though is up here. So with what I'm getting as your light direction, these light reflections here are wrong. Actually, I kind of want to do this one just to try to show
Yeah, if you wanna.
what's going on because other people might be able to benefit off of this.
That's very true.
Okay, so big issue here is that um, this what the fucking brush am I on? This big spectral highlight and this has basically the same curvature or a very similar curvature, and they're totally wrong. You've got highlights here and here and here. This is done correctly. This one's good. Um, so this is something that should be fixed. Um, I would take this here and move a much larger sort of highlight right here in this area because this is a big curved blade, right? That means that so it goes nice. I'm doing like this is kind of like I'm gonna have less colors here because I'm just trying to get the idea across. You want a big sort of highlight on here to get that big shiny blade, um, and move it here to the center, so it matches sort of with everything else. Um, and then underneath, is this? I don't know if this is curved. If this is slightly curved and on a different angle up here than it is here on the bottom, then the highlights and stuff will be different. You don't have to match the two. If it is on the same plane and the spectral highlights match or the angle of the faces relative to the viewpoint match up, then you can leave the highlight in the same area. Otherwise, if this is flat, I might actually get rid of this one a little bit or just tone it down a lot here and then work a little bit more on your edges. But that this like the edge under here because the light bounce would be coming back up. And then don't forget to hit all your edges on this top area. Make it pretty apparent, especially these little divots. That should really receive some light here. And then I'll give you more of that gleamy effect. And then the other thing, actually, I wanted to commend you here for this gem. I love that this you painted a full reflection face, which is really bold, and that's awesome. I love it. The one thing I would say is you might want to. So I'm getting this sense that the light direction is coming sort of like kind of from this top down sort of thing, which would make that this face not necessarily the right one to be white. I think that the one that you should be doing would either be this top face here. You could have just kind of like a little edge highlight on this one. Spectral highlight on these edges. Yeah, don't forget to hit your edges. This is blingy. So any of these top facing edges should sort of pick it up. And then we can do where the refraction zone is, which is where the light is coming back, goes into the gem, reflects off, which makes our spectral highlights. And when it goes into the gem and comes back to our eye, that's a refraction zone. And refraction zones get a lot. So this is where you'd want to put a little bit more of that sort of red into here. And that'll just kind of set it off. The one thing I don't like is I don't like this face. I don't know if you're trying to do inner glow here, but if the glow just seems like it's very close to what would kind of be a flesh tone and it's kind of distracting. Maybe picking a different color to do a glow, like this blue. And the other thing is this face here, this area, it's so dark. This should be lit a little bit more. It doesn't have to be super bright, but like I mean, like match like the skin tone. Um, like from here, this sort of like weird purple skin tone. I don't know what he looks like under here, so I'm just gonna doodle and just add a little bit of details, like weird stretchy skin or something. Um, and then kind of that transition here. You can do that. Let's see what happens if we just overlay a little bit of blue or something. The hell? Oh, that's why. Okay. That's not gonna work. Oh. Hmm. Why is this not like? Oh, that why? Okay. Ah, don't go blue. Um, don't go blue because it's too close to the other ones. But I don't even know if you need for the eyes or the really. I think this would be a fantastic piece even without it. Just change some of those reflections and finish up the details on the face and the other little details. And then again, just like before, it seems this is a really common issue with everybody. So let's kind of darken these bottom planes a little bit. Anything that's not facing the model. And just kind of, you can take this even a little bit further. Shape the model. And then you can do a more general one.
I think we all have a fear of going too dark in the shadows at the risk of something not looking finished or painted.
Mm-hmm. So take a look at, I'm sure everybody in here knows Dave Caldwell. One of the things I find, he is a master of just hammering focus, absolutely hammering in focus. To the point, if you look at some of his models, I mean, down towards the feet or the lower areas, I mean, it's dark, not quite, it's not black, but it's very, it's lower, it's desaturated with edge highlights, like spectral edge highlights on the top to kind of show the definition of the model. But if you study his work, that's how you create focus. He's a freaking master at it. Okay, the belt.
Yeah. So Sassy kind of wanted to know. Well, she feels that the red needs more contrast, but where she's struggling is the black and purple armor. She can't work out how to add in the variance to the color you would need with the leather in terms of like how to highlight it or what part of the color wheel they should be leaning towards. And this is her first time trying to go beyond tabletop and like push into the, I guess, competition
Okay.
scene of painting.
All right. One of the best things that I could probably say is look up references. Okay, so all right, let me start with the red. Yes, in short, I think that you do need more contrast in the red, and it's hard for me to get context on the rest of the model to really tell you where to put shadows here without seeing where it sits on the model and how it's going to look as a whole, because that will dictate how dark you do need to go. The red right now, it looks like you're missing a lot of saturation. So you have got saturation here on this belt area, like this. I'm always on the wrong brush. I do this all the time.
I
Um,
will add another comment. The inside of the belt
so
isn't visible, but she is going to fix it.
yeah, that's okay. I'm not worried about it. I figured that would be. I'm not gonna focus on that. Any little mistakes or something like this, things you didn't get to, I'm not really going to you know poke around on, because I think we all know that if you're missing paint in a spot, like, yeah, paint over it. Um, but this, so you started to get the saturation red here. What I'm getting by looking at this picture is that this is a little bit washed out. I assume that it's probably got a little bit more saturation to it than it does in the photo, like more in hand. So I would say the biggest thing here on these areas, you need to bring that saturation back, just like you did on on this area. So make this match there, and then you can start to push in the shadows. This big plane with these crazy type of textures like this. It's Don't think of each little one as a shape in its own. You should first think about it as a full volume. Um, First, so let's like sort of darken this. I'm getting a little bit of a. I can't tell if it's concave, like a cylinder, like this center line is facing out at me. I'm actually going to assume that it's not. Um, so let's just sort of like add some darkness here. Darkness and saturation. I'm gonna do this whole thing, because that's just bringing saturation back as well as I darken it. Shaping, shaping the model. We're gonna use a purple, bluish purple. Let's
Sassy
do
said it
a
is concaved along that axis, if that's any help.
okay. Yeah, then your highlight, instead of just being straight across like this, if it's concaved in the middle, like if this is your peak, then you're going to have the lighting come down a little bit more like this. So you have to take account curvature on both ones. So, um, oh shit, that is not what I'm trying to do. What am I? Why?
Sorry, correction. Not concaved.
Okay, so it is basically just a part cylinder. Okay, then you just want to keep your here in this area. Let's see how this works. Okay. Add your shadows here. And so we're just kind of shaping the model, creating more contrast. This can be pretty dark. Okay. And then here, just get some of these nice bold reds. So normal. And then you can start adding more of the bold red. That's too magenta. It's not warm enough. We want to go down here. So treat this as a plane first. Just this whole area as one thing where you want to get your colors in. And then you can come back in with your little like sort of spectral highlights and shadows. Um, if you want to use a wash, you can. I typically don't. I don't always advise doing that, because it changes the tonalities everywhere. But if you have to, that's fine. Instead of dark lining, just when you bring it back up, just don't paint in the shadows. Um, and then if you went, I would go something a little bit of a yellow tonality to it. You can start to do all these little ticks on these edges as well. But I'm not going to hit all of these, because then we're just going to be here for a while. Hope that makes sense. As for the leather, okay, the biggest thing that I have found when painting leather is you need to differentiate the color of the leather itself to the shine or spectral highlights, and then any damage to the leather is a third separate element. So I wonder if it would be helpful for me to someone screen share. Let's go to well, I thought I had my internet open. There we go. Google Images is your friend. Okay. So this is probably a pretty decent reference. It doesn't have the purple tonalities, it has the blue ones. A little bit more of a blue tonality. So any leather texture that you paint in, sort of, I wonder if I can like sort of zoom in. It doesn't let me do that. Can you guys actually see this part on the screen, or should I'll just do this?
I can see it. I assume they can see it.
There we go. This will work better. Okay. So this is our basic color for the leather here, our kind of color range. We have to go to like full opacity. Okay, so some of these are sort of spectral highlights. So like the actual color for your leather is going to be kind of like that, something like this here. And we use a little bit of this in the mid-tone or something. So these are the colors that you would use to sort of establish your basic leather. Okay. Then your spectral highlights to create the shine will come on top. Now remember, painting leather, like anything with any sort of shine, like all of the principles to non-metallic metals still apply, but you're not going to utilize the secondary reflections. Kind of like just painting any sort of shiny material. So you have to keep in mind like your volumes. Like if you notice like here, like basically a cylinder, the highlight comes here. This is kind of like a big sort of sphere like cylinder. So it's like one big highlight here. If this was in the light, the shine would come like this. And same thing here. Um, that's a sphere. I hope I'm doing the other layer. Yeah. And then like you could hit like sort of like your edges, like um the oh, I would have liked to keep those tonalities. Sorry. It's erasing. Why is it? What's wrong with my eraser? And then for our spectral highlights, which is going to be the shine, then you're going to have these other sort of tonalities. And this is where you're going to start working them in based on where the shine is. And this is also can be dictated by the environment. So this is where you want to create your texture and stuff, your texture elements. And then this is where you're going to start to put in your shine. And then afterward, after this is done, is what typically when I would do any type of leather damage or cracking. Um, you could use something a little bit warmer because this is dark if you're doing this type of, color for leather. Um, just to make it pop off a little bit more. One of the things I like to do is with like brown leathers is I actually like to use gray tones, less ivory, because the gray, especially if there's a little bit of green mixed in it, just kind of makes for that little bit of color vibration and allows you to see that damage a little bit better. And then when you do it, you're going to want to hit on these let's see, like say let's go and try to kind of find this like weird sort of like buff color, this is kind of the color that I would use um, for the damage. So, and then kind of like, pops on the edge if you want it to be, what's it called? Worn or whatever. Little scratchies. Maybe a dick. Yeah.
Out of
So,
nowhere, a pain has appeared, boys.
um, but yeah. So let's go back to yours. Actually, I wonder if I can do this. Does that work? Paste? No. Copy paste? Not working? Wow. Yeah. Oh, that's smart. Uh, shit. I feel like I had problems doing this before, like actually copying the layer itself over. Um, oh, that's why. No wonder, because I was on the wrong layer again. So let's go back here. Oh, wow. Okay.
Mag said he missed the peen. Any chance you could redraw it for reference?
Oh, guys, what am I gonna do with you? Okay, so here you go. Oh, now I'm having troubles drawing a dick. All right, let's focus.
Boys, he
Focus.
has
Focus.
made it. He's officially a streamer now. Job done. Well done, Will.
Yeah. You got to draw a dick. All right. So let's try to make this a little bit. Come on, where's my damn brush? Yeah. Oof. No. What the hell? Why is this switched to, oh, there it is.
To be fair, you've got chat on a pretty tame night. Usually they're not this reserved, but they're on their best behavior with you.
The best behavior. You
Yeah.
guys like, I did catch, I think I've caught streams before when they were like giving you all kinds of shit. Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah. You
yeah.
all said that he was networking by talking to me. I can tell you that's entirely true. I'm just kidding. That's actually completely not true. James and I have been kind of shooting the shit for a fair bit.
I'm glad no
Okay,
one's
so
clipped
just
that.
so this is kind of the same way that I would be adding in. This is probably going to be pretty dark because it's facing the model. So I'm just going to do that. So any of these planes that wouldn't really be catching with shine. Oh, and then the other thing on contrast, you can kind of like darken in these areas here, kind of force that lighting. A little bit of this tonalities, and then I wonder if I can use some of these little like sort of texture brushes. Let's take this, but just make it a little bit lighter. And then I picked up some of these texture brushes not long ago, and let's see if they can work for just kind of creating a quick little leather texture. You know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to hit the brush and you know what I'm talking about. So on this is where I'm sort of creating leather texture. You can do grain if you want, anything like that. So just to add a little bit of variation in the leather itself. Right now it just looks like spatter, but I'm just trying to get you guys to. Actually, I know what I can do. Clean up. All right. And then for your specular highlights, where your shine's going to be, you can start to use kind of these tonalities. Go a little brighter. And where the leather would actually shine. Just like the curvature for the, okay, and then we can go back to try to do some little bit of damage. That's where you can kind of do some stuff on the edges, scratch.
Chris, your forehead became a 5 head when he gave you a compliment.
What's that?
Oh,
Me?
Chris was saying,
Yours.
"Oh, I'm giving Chris P some abuse because we're all talking about how much knowledge we're absorbing here." But Chris became, oh, it just went straight to his head whenever you said he did a good job. He's been blushing over it all night.
You did, man. You did. It's definitely you're definitely uh a very technically proficient painter. You did a good job. So now just work on your color and light. So this is a really shitty sketch, but hopefully it kind of gives you the idea. Hopefully that's helpful. Leather's a little bit harder to do without prep.
Cool, cool. I think that's been very helpful for Sassy. I think like dark leather is definitely the path to go down with this one. I think there was one more late addition into the Discord channel from Space Cow. There's a couple of
Okay, hold
pictures
on.
there to choose from, and then that will be the last one of the evening.
Okay, and then I'm gonna have to like go get dinner. It might be just in time because
I
kids are
skipped out
probably
on
about to
dinner
show up and wreck our party.
because I
All
was
right,
like,
so
oh, it won't last this long. But look at you, professional, 3 hours in your first stream.
um, that's something that oh, that's a great, such a great bus too. Okay, let's do this one. It's like kind of where you'd want to do main viewpoint. Yeah, I am one of those people that once you get me talking, just kind of gushes out. And all you guys asking for feedback.
Dude, they've all been loving it. Like, there's
Good.
been, I'll even have to rewatch this video just to take in some of the stuff.
This is really good. I really like where this is going. Um, this is honestly what I'm going to tell you on this one just goes in line with what I was saying on to everybody else about focus. Like that is the biggest issue here, and I assume this is a work in progress, but I'm not sure. I do really like this around this kind of barky sort of texture coming up, like mixing it in here. One of the things that I'm not super crazy about is the purple because it's like when I look at it, I immediately think like sort of some type of gemstone or something. Um, and this here tells me like sort of bark or something. So if you're gonna do bark, I'd say go more to a brownie tone or maybe even brownish greens than the purple. If it's gemstones, that's fine. But I might change this around a little bit on how you're melding that into the skin. Um, I'd like to see more texture on the snake. The snake looks very, very smooth, and in my life, I have never seen it that looks smooth. Um, so it just looks almost unreal to me having something this smooth compared to the other textures that you've used. If everything was smooth all over the piece, then I'd say, okay, yeah, cool, go for it. But like something like this, like tells me texture, and then having a smooth snake just kind of seems a little bit odd. Um, go back to the color burn. Um, oh, let's go back a little. Darken this. Shaping, shaping, shaping. Um, Not super crazy about the direct on light, but it's fine. It works. Let's see. So let's just sort of kind of shape her anatomy a little bit more. Just adding in a little bit of shadows in these other areas. Even kind of create a little bit of one underneath here. More shadows. You can accentuate that rib a little bit. That's probably a little bit dark. And then here too, the way these hips sort of work, there's sometimes a little ridge here. And then you can make this much darker. Um, I would like to see maybe just a little bit more differentiation present on female anatomy. I'll try and knock this down a little bit. See if we can build this up. Just a little bit under here. Not much. Just a little bit too. You can brighten that belly button. Because that'll be a plane. Oh, got a little more saturation. Hip. I would probably try to smooth the face out just a little bit here. Because typically, I know a lot of people like to go, heavy contrast on the female face. What that does is it can make them look old because typically women don't have those stronger folds and features like you do on a guy on like or like a barbarian or something like that. And as opposed to making them look like very beautiful or dynamic or then they start to look aged because when you start to push in and use darker values to create contrast and you start to push in stuff like underneath here, it looks like wrinkles and so if you want to paint sort of a younger woman, then I would kind of smooth this out just a touch. But the face is coming along really, really nicely. And I'd actually probably tone down these just a little bit. They're a little bit far forward on the cheekbones. Can you guys see where I'm doing this? See how that's just toned down a
Yes.
little bit? And then let's copy this. Oh, I heard a door. That might be my kid, so it might be able to be getting loud here pretty soon. Let's brighten up this chest plane here because this is still coming through. The collarbone normally doesn't extend over this far, so you make this. Damn, where's my? That's why. Let's bring this up and make that a little bit more rounded. A specular highlight here over the breast. And this is basically a white with a little bit of yellow. Shape her breast and rib cage just a bit. And then let's do I would accentuate this hip a little bit more. Just really kind of show beautiful figure. Let's undo that. Yep, kind of where I go here. Um, then you can, differentiate some of these little vines and stuff a little bit more. These dark folds. Um, Pushing some shadows. It creates differentiation of elements. If you want to make the snake shiny, you could do something. So differentiate a top highlight from a side. And then pushing contrast, pushing focus everywhere. I like this apple here. It's kind of cool, but it doesn't have to be super bright. And I might differentiate the snake a little bit from the apple. They're very, very similar greens, and it gets lost a little bit within each other. And in these areas that would be really kind of deep, dark, just a touch right here. Just try to blend that out just a little. This front piece is just bothering me a little bit. Then skin focus. What am I on? That's why. Pull all of this down. And what this does is force that focus into the center.
Joe, I'm so glad that you've done this before I've tried to tackle the bust that I'm gonna do. There's just
Yeah,
so much that I need to think about.
yeah. It's fun, man. Can even go further.
It's crazy. Like
So,
a lot of the stuff you've mentioned, I wouldn't have crossed my mind at points.
well, oh, so here I'm gonna close this out. I'm gonna come back to the what's it called the stream. This is
We,
Discord. We're on Discord, right?
uh, well, we're on
And
Discord,
then
yeah, but
I'm going to stop streaming.
all right. Oh, had to he drop the call? That would be awkward.
And then
Oh, thank God he's still here.
what's that?
For a
I'm
second, I
still
thought
here.
you'd drop the call. Um, Toad Chapel. Will said this is by far the most productive you've ever been.
Fucking Rhett. God damn it. Toad Chapel is one of my very friends and one of my very good painting buddies. I'm glad you made it the end of the stream, buddy. So and he's
So,
right.
guys,
Normally when I'm painting on Discord, I talk a shitload to get painting group hangouts. So but yeah, I hope that all of that the feedback was helpful to all you guys and everybody enjoyed it and it was informative. I'm going to keep practicing it and hopefully sometime in the relatively near future I may open up for some private coaching spots online. It will not be through a Patreon or anything like that because I am not I'm not the best with that kind of stuff and with my life as it is pretty busy. 2 kids, full-time job, bunch of stuff going on. You know, it's hard to get my own painting time in. And Rhett knows all about that. Talk about me being productive. Um, but it is something that I'm really interested in. So just keep your eyes peeled if you're interested.
yeah, for sure, guys, do keep an eye out for that. Also, well, for me, I want to say a big thank you for coming on tonight and giving us an insight into, I guess, your process and giving the feedback to the people on stream doing that live session. It was really really helpful.
Dude, thanks for having me, man. It was a blast. Hopefully this isn't the won't be the last time. Happy
Oh,
to come on
fingers
and hang
crossed,
out
Joe.
another time and yeah.
Yeah, chat's
And then
loved
hopefully
it.
we'll finally get to hang out in person too. And if I can eventually make it over to Iron Skull or something.
Yeah, that
But
would be a blast. You get to meet
yeah,
a load of these people as well. There'd be a load of the people
I
from
know,
the
right?
chat that'll be there.
I'd be excited.
Yeah.
So
So, chat, if you want to give
awesome
a
stuff, guys.
big, massive thank you to Will, and be sure to go check out his Instagram as well. If you're not already following this man, I'm not exactly sure as to what you're doing on Instagram.
Definitely appreciate it. Oh, and any last minute questions you have?
Oh, Chris
Give
says,
them a minute.
if you come to Iron Skull, please don't enter.
I can't promise you. You can't be more afraid of me than some of the other guys that go over there and enter. I mean, didn't wasn't Arnow there last time?
Yeah,
Freaking there's a bunch of heavy hitters. And I know like Steve Garcia won the one squad last time he was up there, and Phil Price won a bunch of stuff. He's another friend of mine. He's a killer freaking painter. Um, so those are all other guys you should be.
Oh, Frog has a question just asking, when would you use a desaturated color? For some reason, my command's not working, but um,
Um, I use desaturated colors all the time. It depends on the palette. So one of the reasons that I mentioned going why saturated colors are so because that's going to be my starting point for everything. I can create desaturation, but I can't create saturation. So I start with something that's saturated, and as I start to mix more tones into that main color, then it'll naturally become desaturated. Anytime you add black to a mix, white to a mix, um, or any of that, you're starting to desaturate. And it also depends on like there are certain elements of a model that you don't want to be saturated. If you make everything saturated, then it's just going to be this busy clashing mess. So it's about using saturated and desaturated colors tastefully. The desaturated colors will support, you can either use them to support your saturated colors, or you can almost kind of use them as like sort of placeholders in areas that you don't want to draw focus to, because a desaturated color will draw a lot less focus than something saturated.
makes sense. Um, yeah, I guess like guys, I really can't offer much more from the stream. Will has already imparted so much information on us. Um, it's been a blast having you on, mate. I've
Dude,
definitely
likewise.
learned a lot.
Likewise, man. We'll definitely have to do it again. All
Yeah, for
right. But
sure.
for now, I gotta go wrangle the kids.
No
So
worries. All right, guys, it's
I will
been
catch you
great
guys
chat.
soon.
Hopefully you've loved
It's
it,
been real. It's been real. So
and there will
catch you
be
guys
this.
later.
Catch you
Oh,
later.
go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I will
This is
get
your
this
show.
edited and up onto YouTube as well, so it will be on Twitch and on YouTube in the very near future. So you'll be able to come back, watch it whenever you want, be able to see this gorgeous man on the internet again. All right, guys, I will catch
Yeah,
you all
guys.
later. We may as well raid into someone here, but well, I'll let you go do the family thing, and I'll
Uh,
chat to you later. Have a good one,
all
buddy.
right. Sounds great, man. All right. Cheers, guys. Later.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.